Right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners to order. It is Tuesday, August 13. And first up is prayer and pledge. So Dick Van Dop could come and get us started. That'd be great.
Will you bow with me? Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer of the universe, mighty God, we ask you to look down upon this small collection of your people this morning as we are gathered to do the county's business. We pray for wisdom, for discernment, and for grace. May our words be soft and our hearts not hardened this morning, Lord. And may we share a smile with someone else to brighten their day. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. If you could please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Cosby, Mr. Kleinians,
Here.
Mr. Zylstra,
Here.
Mr. Bonema,
Here.
Mr. Moss,
Here.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Here.
Mrs. Curran,
Here.
Mrs. Rhodey, Mr. Belknap,
Present.
Mr. Bergman,
Here.
Mrs. Miedema.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Right. Thank you. Seeing as we have no correspondence, we're going to move right into public comment. It's an opportunity for people to come forward and state their name and jurisdiction and have 3 minutes to address the board. Do we have a list?
We did not do a list. There was only a couple, so.
Okay. All right. Who would like to start us off?
Good morning. Donna Mooney, Georgetown Township. I'd like to congratulate Chairman Moss and Commissioners Rhodey, Miedema, and Wenzel on their well-deserved primary victories. I'd like to add that I'm disappointed and saddened to be losing Commissioners Cosby, Belknap, and Ebel, and I truly appreciate your service and sacrifice to our county in your hard-fought battle. Commissioner Curran, I also thank you for your service and sacrifice. Bergman, good riddance. My hope is that whoever eventually ends up in those seats has the intestinal fortitude to work for the betterment of all people of this county, uphold our state and U.S. constitutions, to include the constitutional resolution passed in this county to equally protect the rights of all people, free of discriminatory practices like didn't earn it and division, intolerance, and exclusion. We had roughly 33 people running for 11 commissioner seats, and only a handful ran as Democrats. Most ran as Republicans, though we've been shown by some of those folks that they don't share Republican values. Take Mark Northrup, for example. He ran as a Republican, but on a Facebook post demanded Commissioner Moss stop exercising his constitutional rights in what Mr. Northrup deemed his city because he stated it scared his citizens. Thank God Mr. Northrup lost. Kudos to those Democrats who were at least honest and had the courage to run on what they actually believe, including Commissioner Kleinians. If Democrat policies are so great, then why aren't people in this county flocking to vote for Democrats? Why aren't Republicans flocking to run in the Democrat primaries? Lying, cheating, and stealing the rights of Republicans to choose their representation by Democrat crossover in the Republican primary, untruthful media, and constant attacks by so-called nonpartisan PACs, maximum donations by wealthy donors to candidates in areas these families do not reside, dirty voter rolls that a corrupt Secretary of State refuses to clean up, the same Secretary of State who's been ruled against numerous times in court for exceeding her rulemaking authority and not following established election law, and who's also now threatening the free speech of anyone who dare questions the integrity of Michigan elections, combined with mail-in ballots, lack of ID and signature verification, lack of ballot imaging, and too many other inconsistencies and dishonest behavior leave the idea of free, fair, and the most secure elections severely lacking integrity and hanging on a blood transfusion for dear life. No, I do not trust our election system. Those who think these actions are acceptable and conducive to free, fair, and secure elections won't understand your contribution and the loss of your own freedom until the boot of communism is firmly planted up your ass. Nobody wins when we no longer have the right to choose our representation, and in fact, history dictates this never ends well. True Republicans want less government intrusion and spending, while Democrats want bigger government and bigger handouts in which to buy their votes and place them in permanent authoritarian power. Can anyone tell me what happened the last time the people were taxed without representation? Thank you.
All right, would anyone else like to address the board?
My name is Dave Barnowski and I voted for Sheldon Township. I spent the entirety of the time that the canvassing board was in session last week with them. There were mistakes, there's things being corrected, but they're small. There's nothing wrong with the way our elections are being run, and anybody who says otherwise either doesn't understand how elections are run or doesn't want to believe it. Nobody cheated. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, I was an alternate canvasser and I certified your votes, your election, your primary, where you all first won. My signature's all over that race. It gets done fairly, it's done in a bipartisan manner, and anyone who doesn't understand that didn't show up and watch any of it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board?
Karen Obitz. Karen Obitz, and I vote in Spring Lake Township. I also work the absentee voter accounting board in the township, and I have done so since the primary of, no, actually May 2022. Don't hold me to that. Memory's sketchy. The point is that I have heard more often spoken this primary than any other time the phrase crossover voting. This is eminently confusing to our voters. As someone who processed absentee ballots, what we learned is that some people fail to remember that they must stay in one party or the other when voting partisan races. What I have heard that is so confusing is that the word crossover actually, I believe, means when you do spoil your ballot in the primary by failing to stay in one partisan side. The way in which one of the public commenters this morning referred to crossover voting is actually not an accurate description, I believe, of what that means. It is an open primary state here in the state. I know this is something people can look up for themselves, but please understand, it is not crossover voting when if you typically align with one party versus another, that you choose in a primary election to vote for candidates where the races only have that party represented. That was true of several of our races this primary. If I wanted to have a say, and I did want to have a say in who would prevail for those positions, my only choice was to vote in that particular primary. So please use clear language, whether you are an elected official or making a public comment, speaking with your neighbors and friends. Our elections desperately need to have people use very clear language and know what it is they're speaking about so we can finish this whole sowing distrust in our election before November. This is important. Everyone who can hear my voice, please, please do what you can to be clear, concise, accurate, and work together so that we can continue to have the kind of secure election processes we already have. And I echo Mr. Barnowski's sentiment. The canvass is still going on today. He believes maybe it'll be done by the end of this meeting. Go down there, spend some time, watch the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
I'm Harvey Nickel from Jenison. Thank you for all you're doing in Ottawa County to support our parental rights and constitutional freedoms. I thank Mr. Roebuck's office for supplying the data about the births and deaths in Ottawa County. The average number of deaths in Ottawa County in 2018 and 19 was 1,796. In 2020, the number of deaths increased to 2,183. That was the year that COVID was released on the world. I wonder how many of those deaths were a result of the treatment with remdesivir and the ventilator. Data now show that the mortality rate was over 97% for patients over 65 who were put on mechanical ventilation. This was a death sentence and reprehensible because many doctors tried to inform the public that there were successful early treatments such as HCQ, ivermectin, and budesonide. However, these treatments were banned and the doctors who recommended these treatments were censored. After COVID, one would expect that the deaths would go back down to about 1,800. However, the deaths in 2021 were 2,111. In 22, there were 2,122. And 2023, there were 1,999. What happened in 2021? The mRNA COVID shot was pushed by all the health departments and every media outlet and it was mandated by many businesses, big corporations, and universities. This increase in death rate has been reported around the world, yet the media is silent. What is even more disturbing is the birth rate. The average number of births in Ottawa County in 2018 and 2019 was 2,420. In 2020, the birth was 2,228. In 23, in 21, there were 2,111 births, and 22, there were 2,095 births, and in 2023, there were only 1,930 births. Since 2021, there have been fewer births than deaths in Ottawa County. This decrease in birth rate is being observed around the world. Biodistribution studies during the Pfizer trial showed that the mRNA lipid nanoparticles concentrated in the ovaries and the testes, yet the CDC and the health departments recommended it for pregnant women. The Kansas Attorney General has filed a lawsuit against Pfizer claiming that they misled the citizens on the safety and efficacy of the mRNA vaccine. They claimed that the shot was safe, yet the data showed that there is myocarditis and miscarriages. They claimed that the COVID shot was effective, yet their data showed that it did not stop infection, and they never did studies to show that it stopped transmission. There are numerous reports of menstrual problems after the COVID shot, and obstetricians have reported a huge increase in the number of miscarriages. Why is Ottawa County Health Department not investigating this, and why is the media not reporting this information? This must be investigated, and the people responsible must be held accountable.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? There is a second opportunity for public comment towards the end of the meeting. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Support.
A motion and support. All in favor of approving today's agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carried. We do have consent resolutions. Does anybody have any consent resolutions they want to pull off before we continue? Commissioner Miedema.
I would like to pull off item G.
Okay, item G would then be 8C, which will be after our closed session today. Anybody else? Commissioner Zylstra.
Just item M, please, the capital improvement plan.
Item M.
Just have a discussion on that one.
Okay. Okay, so then we'll move M to 8D. Okay. All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent resolutions as? Yep.
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Sorry. Motion and a bunch of support. All in favor of approving those consent resolutions? Do we need to go to a vote for those, actually?
Yes,
Okay.
the
let's do
money.
that.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra, Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mrs. Miedema,
Yes.
Mr. Kleinjens,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, so up next would be 8A, purchasing card policy. Suggested motion is to approve the revised purchasing card policy and advance it for a second reading before the Board of Commissioners.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion and support. Any discussion on the P card policy? Wasn't too much to it this time. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, administration, for some of those updates. And could we just do a roll call for this one as well?
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra, Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Kleinhans,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, up next is 8B, closed session for union negotiations. Suggested motion is to go into closed session for the purpose of strategy and negotiations. Sessions connected with the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement pursuant to OMA Section 8C. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Support.
Second.
All right, motion and support. Let's go to the clerk for a roll call on this as well.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mr. Kleinhans,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Medema, Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran, Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, great. All right, we'll be in closed session. Welcome back, everyone. I'll call this, we're coming out of closed session. And we have a suggested motion, which I will read. Suggested motion is to ratify the negotiated AFSCME Public Health Collective Bargaining Agreement effective through December 31, 2025, and approve the necessary budget adjustments to fund from general fund contingency through September 30, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and support. Is there any discussion on this item? All right, do we need a roll call vote on this?
Sure.
Okay.
Being spent, so I think.
Oh, dollars, the budget adjustment.
Oh, yeah, good. Let's do it. Yeah.
Mr. Belknap.
Yes.
Mrs. Curran. Mrs. Medema.
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel.
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Mr. Kleinens.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. That brings us to 8C, which was 7G. So that's the contract for the provision of sheriff's uniforms, apparel, and accessories. The suggested motion is to approve a 5-year contract with on-duty gear for the sheriff's office uniforms, apparel, accessories, and equipment. Approximate first-year cost is $110,000.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion? Commissioner Medema.
I don't know if Sheriff Kempker or someone from the Sheriff's Department is here. I did watch the finance meeting, but I had some follow-up questions.
All right.
Morning. Morning. Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you for being here, Eric. I listened to the finance meeting where Sheriff Kempker was talking about the uniforms for the 5-year contract. And I guess my first question would be, do you know in the 5 years, are the uniforms what you currently have? Is that what you will anticipate continuing to have over the next 5 years within that contract?
So just, so you know, that the 5-year contract is for the vendor services. The vendor provides uniform apparel for law enforcement companies all over the states. And they service both the type of uniforms we have now and uniforms of any type of agency going forward. So part of the RFP process when we were discussing things were, if things were to change, could you accommodate those? So regardless of what happens going forward, on duty would be, and all the people that came in for their RFP were able to move if we so chose.
Okay, so if you wanted to choose to upgrade uniforms, you would have the luxury of doing so within this contract.
Any changes needed would be serviced by on duty. Yes.
Okay, and when you say needed, meaning like if you chose to go a different direction with different uniforms, you would be able to do that within the current contract?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
Any changes that we decided on going with, if we choose to.
Okay.
will be serviceable, yeah.
Do you know, Eric, how long, I believe they're Class A uniforms, is that correct?
Our current work uniform is considered a Class A uniform.
Okay. Do you know at all, like how long those have been in service within our department?
I guess I don't understand what you're asking.
So I'm wondering
Oh,
when's
you're
the,
talking about stock, or are you talking about the exact shirt we're using now? Because that's changed as technology changes so that they're more breathable or don't rip or that sort of thing. So we've had different iterations with the same look. The look has been, I've been here 25 years and it was the look that everybody had when we came here. Historically, it was set by the Michigan Sheriff's Association and everybody that was a sheriff's office went with that. Obviously, you've seen over the course of the past, 5-7 years that people have gone away from MSA standards. But to say that, I think when I came back out of the Detectives Bureau, we were just switching to a different type of shirt that was more breathable. It's got like gussets on the side that have a little bit of stretch to them. So when you bend, they're not binding, that sort of thing. Ways to hook body cameras on or to run mic wires up through your shirt. So those kind of things have been changing as technology evolves. So I don't have a good answer for that. But
Okay. No, I appreciate what you said. Is there some things that you consider when you start looking at a department of when you would want to upgrade? And would it be a big budget adjustment if you wanted to look at a different type of uniform?
So the real complication when it comes to any type of large change within our organization is the fact that county has a certain burden, but a lot of that is passed on to contracts because we contract with like a large number of townships within the county. And so any move that we make that incurs a cost, we see on the front side here and we can make an informed decision. But we're also informing the budgets of multiple townships out there. Now, there are townships that are well off that could probably deal with that and not be, not be bothered by it. But there are also townships that only have a portion of a deputy and can barely afford that as it is, and they want to keep that. So we have to be careful when we make those decisions, and those decisions have to be made very specifically and very thought out. So it's not, any type of change like that isn't off the table, but it has to be done well planned out so that we don't burden our contracts, because they rely on our services as much as anyone else.
How possible would it be to have communication, like putting it kind of as a strategic plan that you would slowly phase out maybe one uniform and maybe replace, not doing it everything all at once, but so that you are planning, so that you are involving discussions with the local townships, that you're proactively looking at it together?
So, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with something you said is strategic plan. So what we need to do and what we're beginning the process of actually currently is getting together and working on a long-term strategic plan that involves everything and will help us prioritize our spending, given that money is at a premium and we are Ottawa County and we are fiscally conservative. So any type of changes we make, we have to do in the right order and at the right time, so it's not to burden the county or the townships. So yes, there will be a strategic plan, and then we will prioritize our spending. So if a change in uniforms is A, desired, and B, needed, where does that fall and what do we have to do to shore up some of the shortcomings we see in other places during our strategic plan? So any type of rollout that's department-wide, and you're going to see it, and we didn't talk about the Axon contract today, but even that, and it's an obvious rollout, it's an obvious yes for you guys, and I appreciate that, but it's still a rollout for a large organization with a lot of vehicles. So all of that is done in a way so as to minimize our disruption of our operations. In that case, we have to train, we have to teach everybody how to use their things. We can't have them all off the road at the same time. What happens when one squad has them or part of a squad has them and the other part doesn't, and something bad happens, and now it happens to the person that didn't have a camera, and now all of a sudden we're hearing, well, that person didn't have a camera. We have to go through all those things. So anything we roll out countywide is always going to be done in a strategic way, and if it has to be done incrementally, then it has to be done incrementally.
Thank you. I might have a couple follow-ups in a second, but if anyone else.
Anyone else have any other questions on this one? No? Okay. Anything else?
I think I guess the only other thing I would say is the reason why I asked for this to be discussed today is it's something that I've been hearing is a major factor from deputies and others that are working within the department. That is something that they would love to have a conversation, giving feedback. So I would just encourage you, maybe you already are, of having conversations with those in your department. And I think hearing from you as well is good, because the understanding of what you're having to think through from the top and also hearing from the other side. So.
Ultimately, any type of strategic planning, if done correctly, is going to take into account the input of all stakeholders, internals as well as externals. And so any type of planning going forward will obviously have the input of everyone in the agency, as well as yourselves or your replacements, and also department heads and township officials and all that. So everybody's on the same page, so that when there are budgetary incursions, whether that be at the county level or at the township level, they were involved in the process, understand the process, and at least they're somewhat on board with that collective work that we've done as a group. So that's our intention moving forward. Again, that process is in the infancy. We're going to start to set some of the infrastructure now, so that after the next board is sat, they are involved, because those will be people that are involved in the budget making process for the next year.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Just a reminder, the motion is to approve the 5-year contract with on-duty gear. And so let's go to a roll call.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap, Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Kleinjens, Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next up, 8D, this was 7M. which is the 2025 capital improvement plan. Suggested motion is to review and approve the 2025 to 2030 capital improvement plan.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and support. Any discussion on this one?
Yeah.
Doug, you had.
Yeah, just a
pulled
few
it on.
questions real quick.
Yeah,
I don't know if Karen is still here.
yeah, she is.
Um,
Take it away.
so on the, do you want to kind of present through or do you want to, which do you prefer?
We went it pretty in depth during the finance
yeah.
committee meeting.
Yeah, so I don't really
Yep.
need a presentation, just a couple questions.
I can just do a quick overview of.
Go for it,
what
yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
with
Yep.
The plan is the 5-year plan through 2030. It has the funding of the projects that currently exists with the unencumbered balance as it is as of 6/20/24, and then the 2025 year, which is the year that's really the main focus, because that's the year that would be folded into the fiscal year 25 budget. The 26, 27, 28, 29, the future years, obviously, for planning purposes and probably not as solidified, tend to change more as we continue to work on future years. But so that the focus of the committee really, just a quick summary from a facilities standpoint. I think they really focused in on those key areas that they saw as need to have kind of a continuation, probably of what they were planning on from last year, kind of rolling forward. And as they're still getting some of those assessments in place, with the completion of the Family Justice Center, still working towards those moves and things around making those changes. That's probably the parks, as you know, have their separate planning process. It goes to the Parks Commission and they have a separate approval, and then that gets folded into this plan to present one county plan. And then the IT projects are the ongoing infrastructure to support the county's IT is probably to summarize.
Yeah, and a pretty heavy focus on paving, some carpet, some IT upgrades, which is pretty normal as well, especially on a rolling basis. Was there maybe a roof in there somewhere?
I think
Yeah.
likely.
Yeah, so just a couple of specific questions. Then on the ADA updates, we haven't actually spent anything on that. There's a few encumbrances. So that's most likely going to get pushed out to 2025. That work, correct?
Projects are approved on a life basis,
Mhm.
so they would automatically roll.
Okay,
So that would likely roll. There are an architect engineering contract.
Okay.
That's the encumbrance that's approved. They are doing the assessment in those facilities now.
okay. And we don't foresee any more projects kind of falling into the ADA update section, just the James Street buildings, right?
I don't want to really speak for facilities, but it was my understanding that they were going to use those buildings to potentially build off of.
Okay, kind of get an idea how that works out for us. Okay, cool. And then going to HVAC, there's, we approved quite a substantial amount for last time, but there's really been no activity yet. But yet still 25 through 28 has a lot of activity as well. How is that going to kind of play out? Just kind of looking at it as like a couple $1 million in HVAC work that really hasn't been started yet, but yet still for 25, there's 1 point something millions scheduled. Is that gonna kind of come all at once then, or what's the thinking on that?
Are you the building automation system
The
replacement?
system's HVAC, sorry.
Right, so that I know facilities is currently working with procurement on how to spec those
Mhm.
systems to get a fair and open assessment, to get a single vendor that can supply that system to us.
Okay,
And so we're currently working through the scoping of that.
okay,
And so, but probably looking at, and the idea was to phase that, so that was always in the plan.
okay, okay, cool. And then just the last one, just in the Family Justice Center. In the out years, you have a note here about departments have submitted a number of projects for fiscal 26 and onward. So it's not like, that's not zero, but there's no dollar amount assigned to that either, right? So that's kind of what you're saying, is that we will likely see something in the out years, but we just don't have any dollar amounts assigned to those. That's in space management, Family Justice Center.
So last year, the CIP team we had looked at trying to live, remember, we talked about that $5 million
Right.
mark. So we had set that 600,000 for a goal for looking at remodels and furniture movement.
Mhm.
And so that $600,000 is there and it's listed. But there's a number of projects also in addition to that may be listed separately, or maybe more above that, or maybe want to just some space needs that need to be looked at separately, to see if it's viable, to see how the county is growing, and may need to be built into our future planning. And so I don't know, for example, the titles were left. Detective Bureau Building Expansion was one of them.
Mm.
And so they had put a number down, and the number honestly seemed too low for what I would know that we could do any kind of building expansion for. And so the feasibility of the price, and so it didn't seem reasonable to leave a number there that would need to be validated by understanding exactly what we're building, an architect, or somebody that would really be more in that industry to be able to tell us what the price of something like that was. And is that how we will define and use our space? And is that how we'll move forward? And so I think we're just trying to wrap our arms around all of that.
Okay.
As a committee, and how to move forward in that section. So it's kind of, finishing up the Family Justice Center was a great project to complete, and then
Right.
just trying to figure out how everything else works moving forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that.
Right, great. Anything else? Commissioner Belknap?
Yeah, just had a question. I see Paul Sachs in the audience, and under the Department of Strategic Impact, there was a $200,000 cell tower construction. I was just curious, update on location of that, and just a little bit of background on that one.
Welcome, Paul.
Good. Yeah, that is a good question. When we started looking at fixed wireless infrastructure across the county, maybe 15 years ago, we were strategically looking at locations where the RF analyses showed gaps. And then we would work with providers to build towers. One of those areas, there are two areas in particular that we were looking at. One was Spring Lake Township, another in Talmadge Township. There was a placeholder for the $200,000 to put a tower up, and that was in the CIP. We kept it in there for a few years and never activated it to use those funds, because we only want to construct a tower when we have at least 2 carriers agree to co-locate on the tower, which then allows us to pay that tower off in less than 5 years. So there are never any bites during that time. And then we kind of strategize and move towards more of the fiber route. And we've got a second contract now with Tilson Infrastructure and other towers. And they're putting all the capital investment into the towers with the revenue share back to the county. So all that being said, the $200,000 for tower construction has been removed. us. So that is where that lands.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay. Why don't we go to a vote, roll call on this as well?
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Kleinens,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you. Moving on, we don't have any committee reports, so we are up to 10 public comment. It's a second opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Right. Last call for public comment. Moving on, we just have administrators report. Any updates, Mr. Anderson?
Just want to give everybody a reminder, the public hearing for the 2025 fiscal year budget is on September 10th at the 9 a.m. Meeting. It's about all we have.
Okay. All right. Well,
Mr.
oh, Commissioner's out.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, John. Just a quick question on the community spoke payment. Do we have an update on that?
I'm sorry, on the what?
Community spoke payment for the services for last year. I thought we were supposed to see this on this agenda, but.
I don't have any update on that right
Okay,
now.
all right, I'll follow up
Okay.
with you later on that.
I'll follow up on it and see.
Okay.
So John, do we have an update on what's happening with the move of the, in the courthouse in Grand Haven of the probate judge?
It is still in progress, because of the architectural issues or concerns on that second floor where the storage was going to be. That's what kind of caused some delay. We had to get all the weight and see if they had to do any further construction to make sure that floor could handle the storage. It did push it back a little bit. We've been in contact with the court to let them know that. Last I heard, I think we're looking at least through October for that. Yeah. And it was just everything had to do with that architectural report because of that storage room they want to use. Everything else is actually moving forward. It wasn't as big of a deal. It was just that storage room that used to be a hearing room.
Thanks. All right, anybody else? Okay, seeing as we've reached the end of our agenda, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.